Okay, so hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Default Global. This is where we connect with global first entrepreneurs and remote work experts from all around the world to share their experiences. Our guest today is James Sullivan, founder and CEO at OneSeven Technology. James, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, James, before we start, could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm James. I'm the founder and CEO of OneSeven Tech. We're a digital product studio located here in Miami for startups pre-seed to Series A. We work on product strategy, UX/UI design, and software engineering for different startups.
And that sounds good. Sounds cool. So I did some research on your on your biography, on your company, and I know that you had some previous experience working with outsourcing vendors, and that led to the failure, right? Right.
Yeah.
So just I wanted to start with this one. How did this experience shape your approach in building OneSeven Technology? Kind of to better support startup founders, I guess.
Yeah, to kind of backtrack a little bit as well, I initially dropped out of college to build like an ed tech application, and to your point, I outsourced overseas because I was non-technical at the time, and wanted to like hire a vendor that could actually help me. That was within our budget. I only raised about like 50K in friends and family, and worked a few odd jobs to piece together some other couple $1,000s here and there, and the only options were to outsource overseas, essentially to hire a US agency in New York where I grew up, and then to hire a technical CTO, but I was too young and like didn't know anybody who was in that position. So um, I chose to outsource overseas, and I just had a company that was not equipped to help with some of the project management and essentially get like meet deadlines and scope the project. So ended up kind of failing, and that led to the creation of OneSeven Tech, which was the digital product studio I would have hired at the time. So I started to build who I would have wanted to hire and essentially help me build my first startup. So um, I would say like poor project management was probably at the core of it. Like I think it's really important to follow an agile process, especially for startups. That means like 2 week sprints, 2 week feature releases. If you can get down to that velocity, I think it's really important to have like a solid meeting structure. So you can have like the sprint planning calls on Mondays, and then you kind of work for a week and a half ish. And then on the second Thursday, you have the demos, and then you have the retros, and you have backlog refinement and all those things. So I think like that's an example of good project management, and how essentially that keeps both the customers or the startup founders and the team accountable, because you don't want scope creep to happen, and that happens a lot with startup founders. And I think it's really important to have good project management manage those startup founders from themselves a little bit, but then also make sure the team is meeting every 2 weeks to present what they've done, and that they're actually held accountable of releasing things at a pretty regular frequency.
Got it. But I guess, can we go a bit deeper? Could you share some insights maybe on the challenges faced by startups when it comes to software development specifically, and maybe particularly in the context of offshoring versus hiring a US-based agency?
Yeah, I think for the startups, some of the issues that they run into is they don't do enough planning. Like, I don't think they spend enough time actually defining what these features are and what they mean. And so I think there's a lot of accountability that needs to happen with the startups, and making sure that they're not just like seeing a good idea or hearing one piece of feedback and then they're throwing that into the sprint and derailing the sprint. So I think um, that is like something that startup founders need to spend more time doing, which is like writing down, and this is kind of the work of a product owner as well, but like writing down what the feature is and how that benefits the customer in the long run, and then turns that into an epic and then requirements for the actual dev team or design team to actually implement. And then what's the second part of your question again?
I was particularly interested in like a differences between like offshoring and hiring a US-based agency. Do you
Yeah.
see any differences between those two?
Yeah, I think I'm a big fan of like onshoring and nearshoring. I think it's really important to keep everyone in a very similar or same time zone. I think, in my opinion, when I outsourced, like the time zone was really a big issue. So I'm going to bed, they're waking up, and vice versa. And so if you think about it that way, let's say there's a hot fix that needs to happen. I feel like it adds an extra 3 days by being overseas, like at least 8 hours overseas, like 8 hour difference, because you need to identify what that issue is, write the ticket or raise the flag, right? Then you need to probably meet with the business analyst or some type of project manager. And by the time that actually gets added to the dev team, it's 3 days later because they're just in a whole different, they're a whole day ahead of you. So I think like nearshoring, onshoring is really important if you can't hire uh, and like grow your team in house. But I also think there's a lot of benefits to it as well. You don't have to manage payroll. You don't have to have all the costs associated with that. You can do shorter term contracts. You can do 3 month contracts with certain individuals if you need a specialist and things like that.
Got it. So basically, your suggestion is to work with locations that are like within U.S. time zones. Mostly, we're talking about the LATAM region, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Got it.
I think that's the most beneficial time zone and it helps just with communication. I think in the startup world, communication is the most important. And I don't mean like actually being able to speak. I mean like just being able to speak in a timely manner and solution in real time.
Got it. Got it. And maybe in light of the current, I would say this economic downturn and these challenges that faced by like startups, mostly we're talking about tech startups, right? So many are seeking ways to cut their costs, right? And have you considered outsourcing projects to agencies uh, outside of the US um, as a solution, as a one of the solution to cut their cost, or it's not the best way? What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great time for it. We've grown a lot during this time, and I think it's a really good time to outsource some additional work. Right now, like there's a lot of tech layoffs happening. Like you said, it's kind of an interesting economic time. So it's not like the amount of work went down. It's just now you have less of a head count to get the work done. So I think bringing in specialists that you can outsource to are really beneficial for some larger tech companies that, for the time being, and even earlier stage startups. I think everyone was very trigger happy to add a bunch of people to their payroll and not really thinking 5, 6, 8 months down the line if they really still need that person, right? And so, like, I think specialty roles, maybe API integrations, things like that, can definitely be outsourced, where you only need somebody for like a 3 month contract. And I think it's beneficial to have the right vendor around who can help with that additional overflow work. Or if there's hiring gaps, like maybe you don't have designers in house and your HR team needs to go figure out how to go hire those people, vet those people, and bring them on board. Having the right agency around can really help push those projects along.
And expanding on this idea, right? Do you think that startups can greatly reduce their expenses by maybe hiring overseas talent directly instead of relying on outsourcing agencies, or you see some obstacles with that approach? So basically, what I'm trying to ask, currently we have like all that global hiring infrastructure. We have Deal, we have Oyster, we have a bunch of other employee of record companies who can cover your compliance, payroll stuff, right? We have a bunch of those communication tools. There are some local talent acquisition agencies like GoGlobal, for example, who can help you to find guys locally in different countries. And with that, do you still think that working with an outsourcing company, um, does it still make sense?
Yes, I do. I think it depends on what the objectives of the company are, right? So if you don't mind, you know, like if you want to go hire your own team, essentially, you need to have the infrastructure set up, like you mentioned. So you need to be able to manage payroll, uh, have be okay with the expenses associated with that. You also need to have people management and people operations set up. These are people that you need to take care of. They have their own problems. You probably need HR. You need to be able to vet and onboard them. Like you need the infrastructure around it. And a lot of times startups do not have that infrastructure. But if you're willing to put in the work and bring in that infrastructure, I think outsourcing the talent or hiring the talent overseas and then you managing them is a good solution. And it's a great way to reduce costs, but you need to have the management in place as well. That means the product owner, the project management. Like you could have the best engineers in the world in your team, but if there's no structure, it's not going to work out very well. So I think it's really important to be open-minded to the fact of outsourcing and hiring overseas, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense. It does not make any sense if you're not willing to put in the work of the people operations, manage people. Everyone has their own problems. Those problems are now your problems, right? So I think that's important. If you don't want to do those things, hire an agency, right? Like hire somebody who's going to manage all that and has that infrastructure in the back office for that. But otherwise, you're going to need a lot of additional roles to support those hires as well.
Got it, got it. But can we go to maybe to more tactical, practical level? So OneSeven has a highly distributed team, right? You have teammates in of course, in the U.S., I guess in Argentina, Mexico,
Mexico, Spain, we're in like a
in
lot of different
Turkey. Yeah,
countries.
no,
Yeah, we have
do you
like a
have
bunch
someone
of
in
QA
Turkey?
engineers in Turkey, correct?
Okay, perfect. But Turkey is not in the U.S. time zone.
No, that's true. But everyone has to work 9 to 5, right? So we actually built the infrastructure that during our hiring process and vetting process, if you are not willing to work 9 to 5 Eastern, then
Mhm,
this is not the right fit. So like everyone works Eastern Standard Time Zone, and that's kind of like just a company rule that we set up, right? And so we created the structure and the organization to allow for those people to be here, but it took some time, and I think we had to
mhm,
have the right onboarding kind of like rails for those people, and also the right communication pipelines to be able to work in the different time zone.
mhm, mhm. Got it. But for those startups who still want, I guess, to try this, could you share some strategies and maybe best practices for those guys who are looking to build this similar globally distributed team, so like
Sure.
you guys have?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to your point, like Deal is a great platform. We're huge fans of Deal. We would not be able to do payroll without them. I mean, they do all the compliance in every single country, so that's one benefit. But there's also other ones. I think there's it's like Upstart or something like that. But there's a bunch of other payroll platforms. So finding the right payroll platform is first and foremost.
Mhm,
We also made sure to hire a technical recruiter who could actually hire and onboard and vet the talent, and then we have like HR now as well. So we have like a my executive assistant kind of became like HR and then like chief of staff a little bit as well. So Alexandra is essentially going through doing quarterly check-ins with everybody, making sure everybody's happy. We have performance reviews. We have like a set of objectives or like career paths that you can hit in order to like level up. So like we had to build that infrastructure, and I would suggest people build that out, right? Like you don't want a stagnant career role. You want people to be able to grow within your organization and get promotions and get certifications, and you have to describe what that means. So that's like been a lot of work that we've been doing all quarter, which is like setting that up. What are these career paths? Then also what's the communication system, right? Like are we having daily stand-ups? If so, when and how often? It's for us, it's daily, but some people like to skip them, and I think that can lead to a communication breakdown. So we set that up, and then we also have a pretty decent vetting process. So we have, I would say, like different test cases per role. So that was also really important to make sure we're bringing in quality talent. We're not just like throwing them into the fire and then hoping for the best. Like we are going through 3 rounds. There's a test case associated with everything. You meet everybody on the team. The team has to approve the new team member, things like that. So those are some tactics I would set up if I was them. And then also just making sure I would say the most important is check-ins, like just having check-ins with your team.
got it. And you mentioned that you work with Deal, so you hired your teammates from Argentina, Mexico, Turkey using Deal, and I suppose you hired them as contractors, right?
Yeah. We're doing contractors, deals starting to roll out benefit plans and EOR plans for different countries. So we're
Mhm,
starting to look into that. We're starting probably going to start with Mexico and then
mhm,
expand. But yeah, there's like we wanted a platform that is constantly rolling out new features and perks, and I think
Hmm.
that was a huge benefit of deal.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And speaking about this global hiring and going global, what may be the biggest challenge? Number one, what should companies keep in mind before going global? Just one big thing.
Yeah, I would say for us, it was hiring the right project managers. Like I was mentioning before, having the best engineers to me in the world and designers in the world doesn't. I mean, it matters, but it's if there's no structure within the organization, it's tough. So for us, like finding the right project managers that know how to work in the velocity that we work, which is very fast, and know how to work with startups, which are kind of their own type of beast, and we're a startup in a sense, is was very difficult. So I think that onboarding and vetting process took a very long time, and finding the right people that can hang around and really pull projects across the finish line that were a mix between project manager and project owner were really important, and that took a while.
That's great. So you also a mentor in Techstars, Day One, and a couple other incubators, I guess. So I have a couple of questions on that. So the first one, how did you come, mentor in all those startup incubators in well-known like brands in the VC space?
Yeah, I was just asked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I did a
Okay.
couple talks for the Mount Sinai Innovation Partners back in the day, like maybe 3, 4 years ago. That
Hmm.
kind of led to them asking me to do some mentorship and office hours for them, and then some other like accelerators like Day One and Techstars also saw that. They asked me to do the same thing. So I do office hours for a bunch of them: Debut Labs, a little bit of
Hmm.
Antler, Techstars. I do love giving back to startup founders just because I feel like I've seen a lot and I can give a lot of advice.
Sounds great. Okay, and what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are looking maybe for investment during this difficult time when this VC industry is sort of on hold, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough time for sure. I think you have to get creative. Something that I'm seeing that's working decently well is kind of a mix between like angel investors and family offices. Like, I think you have to be creative with where you're going to go for the funding. I think some VCs are kind of gouging these valuations of these startups, and so it's not as appealing right now. And I think it's if you can stand up revenue and not rely on outside capital, I would start there. Like, can you turn on that one function that you've been waiting for and holding off for that can generate some revenue so that you're not fully reliant? So I would say that's first and foremost. Start there. Then try to go raise for if you need to go raise because you're relying on outside capital. Try to go to family offices, angel groups or syndicates if you're like pre-seed or seed. Um, Even some like real estate guys who are trying to diversify their investments outside real estate have been pretty decent investors that I've seen some startups go to. Um, but I would also say like a mix between crowdfunding and those alternatives are also good. So I've seen some people fill up half their round from real estate investors or family office and maybe a syndicate, and then put the other on like Republic, and then go close the round with a crowdfunding campaign and friends and family. And I think that's a great way of getting creative, and also bringing like closing the capital you need and doing what you need to do to essentially get over that hump. But then hopefully that runway gives you enough time to figure out revenue.
That's a good one. And being a mentor, I guess, yeah, you talk to a lot of founders, talk to a lot of startups on a daily basis. So can you maybe share any success stories or use cases from portfolio companies that you basically work with, where going global or hiring global or building distributed teams or maybe working with an outsourcing agency has led to significant growth or cost savings? Do you have any case like that?
Yeah, yeah. A good example of like a great time to hire an agency like ours, for example, was this shipping logistics company that we worked with a few years back. They essentially were a funded startup. They were at their Series A, and they had a bunch of engineers and a CTO and things like that. but they did not have UX UI designers in house. So they knew they wanted to bring that in house, but this was a new role for their HR team, so they needed 3 to 6 months. So that's the work is still sitting there. So they actually brought us in to go do our integrated team model. So essentially do like staff augmentation with management. We came in with a couple of designers and we pushed the projects along and essentially started the design system. We fixed some onboarding issues that they had. We pretty much like talked to customer support and figured out like what's going on with conversion, and we worked through those problems and we set up the infrastructure. So by the time HR was ready 6 months later, they had the right UX UI designer. We had everything completed and we're in a good spot to hand it off to them, and the infrastructure was set up. So I think that's a great example and a great win for them, because we were able to fill a skills gap for the time being, and then we were able to again create that infrastructure so they could pick it up and run from there. And so they went on to raise their Series B, and they're still doing pretty well.
Awesome. And looking ahead, what do you envision for the future of OneSeven Technology? Are there any new initiatives, services, or maybe some kind of expansion plans that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, definitely. We're doing a few things. We just launched an AI service line, so we're starting to do some embedded AI ML teams. So we're kind of leveraging two things: out of the box AI, like the off the shelf things that are uh, popping up left and right. There's like 2,000 new applications that have come out in just the past few months. And we're starting to bring in some AI experts, which is allowing us to then dabble with some of our own products as well. So I'm bringing the AI team obviously in house, and then eventually launching some of our own products. So we'll probably break up into two parts. We'll have the agency side, and then we're going to have a little bit more of like a studio, like building our own products, maybe like more venture studio side, where we've observed some things over the past 6 years that we think are problems in the developer tools and startup space that we're going to build our own solutions for. So we're pretty excited to leverage AI to build those products. And with this new AI service, we'll have those resources in house so we can launch some of our own products and potentially raise or just fund it ourselves in the meantime. So we're super excited to do that because I love practicing what we preach. And obviously, I'm going to have our team build it, which is very exciting. So I'm excited to almost bring in our own integrated team for our R&D in-house projects and start to release and launch those.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I guess we're good. So thanks a lot, James, for sharing your insights on outsourcing, international hiring stuff, on fundraising, and all those challenges and obstacles building distributed teams. So yeah, we wish you and OneSeven Technology all the best in your journey. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great chatting with you.
Yeah, absolutely.